Hello out there, this is the irate veteran coming at you with another video. Any veterans out there that need any veteran to veteran advice, just go to vamadness.com, fill out the contact sheet, and I'll be happy to advise. Today, we're going to be talking about knees. But before I do that, I want to thank my sponsors. I have 3 sponsors now. They help me do what I do. Thank you very much, my sponsors. Um, you can go, if you want to learn more about my sponsors, you can go directly to their website, or I do have links on my website to their websites. Let me read this little disclaimer here. I am not recommending any specific lawyer or law firm to veterans. Veterans need to conduct their own due diligence before selecting a lawyer or law firm as their representative. That being said, I still really thank them. I also want you veterans to start using VA Madness as a resource to help you do what you do. And those of you who help other veterans out there, use my site as a resource. I'm happy. The more people out there who help veterans get their due benefits, the better, right? And if you can use my resources to do that, use them, right? So there are links to all my videos on my website. There are links to most of the VA forms on my website, links to the DBQs. There's a link to the rating schedule, and I'm going to be putting example statements. For example, today, we're going to be actually going through a direct version of a knee statement, right? That is on my website. You can download that and use it as a template for your statement, right? As well as a secondary service connection example of a knee statement, right? Both of them are there. Download them, spread them around, use them to help you cover all the specifics on your knee claim. Okay, knee claims, it's a really big area once I started looking at it, right? When you look at something in depth, you'd be surprised at all the stuff you see, right? So, so I'm doing a 3-part series. This is going to be talking about the theory of service connecting your knee and the statement you need to have to present that theory. But there'll be a separate one on the rating schedule and on the knee replacements will be part of that. And then increases and the C&P exam. And then I'm doing a separate series on arthritis, which of course, arthritis can be at any of your joints, including your knees. Right, so that'll be in those. Look forward to seeing those extra ones. This is part 1. When you're thinking about service connecting something or having to fight to get your service connection done if you've already been denied, right? Typically what I see, and what I'm doing here is using the thousands of veterans I've dealt with, the thousands of claims I personally went through, and what am I seeing, right? Why are there so many fights to get your due benefits? And one of those basic issues that I find out there is that a veteran hasn't explained himself very well, right? Well, this video, if you will pay attention and watch this video, we're going to solve that problem, right? So you need to get a fact-based theory presented as a statement backed by medical documentation, publications, treatise, right? And witness statements if you have them. One thing I'm going to say about witness statements, and that'll be a different video about witness statements, but one thing I want to say about as far as witness statements, that witnesses that have knowledge of your symptoms, right? Remember, when you present your self-reported symptoms, right, that's a subjective report according to you, right? But if you have a witness who specifically reports seeing you with those same symptoms, now it becomes objective evidence, right? So yes, whenever possible, when you have witnesses to your symptoms, have them write a statement. Yes, I've seen him limping right? Yes, I've seen him, having to sit on the recliner with his legs straight out all day with ice on it, right? So you want to get a witness statement for these things. Why? Now they become objective evidence, right? So anyway, but now when we go, think really hard. Why is your condition service connected? What's your theory, right? Is it because you have complaints, treatment, or diagnosis while you're in service? That makes it easy if you do, right? Easier, right? But, what are some of the, and remember, just because you have a complaints, treatment, or diagnosis in service, that doesn't mean you get service connected for it, right? It makes it easier. But think of the specifics. What led to those complaints? Was it because you wore, your combat boots during runs, or was it because of a heavy load, because of helmets, heavy packs, web gear, body armor, right? Was it the PT program, physical activity, or were you, working supply where you had to, lift ammunition all day on the trucks and whatnot, right? So, or was there you have some kind of mechanical alignment issue with your body? One side, a leg limb discrepancy or something, right? That, maybe if, forcing more stress on one side of your body, right? So, did you have weight gain while you were in service? Um, or do you have weight gain after service? But that weight gain's being caused by service connected condition. Is that a factor, right? Do you have undocumented injuries while you're in service, or chronic symptoms while you're in service that you just never reported, right? So you have to take all these, you just can't go about this half-assed, right? You have to really sit down and think, what was it? What is it, right? All together, right? And that's what I'm doing here today, right? Is we're going to look at all these different things, and how can we produce um, a narrative that encompasses our experience and how that experience affected our needs. Right? That's what we're doing today, right? So listen up. Um, let's talk about just your basic service connection requirements. Of course, current diagnosis, in-service event, a nexus between your in-service event and your current diagnosis. Let me talk about current diagnosis for a second. Do you have to have a current diagnosis? You don't. You can go to the C&P exam and hopefully they'll give you that current diagnosis. But the danger is they may not give you the current diagnosis, right? Which is why if you can get one, right? But if you have a condition that's been repeatedly diagnosed over the years, or it's on your active problem list at the VA, the C&P examiner is probably just going to ditto those things, right? And it's not going to be a problem, right? And one thing about, for those of you with arthritis, that never has to have a current diagnosis. Once you get a diagnosis, it's always considered current, right? So if it's arthritis is your issue, don't even worry about a current diagnosis. And the same with the nexus. And that's one of the things I'm trying to avoid for you veterans out here is veterans are constantly trying to pay all these services, for a nexus statement, right? And you may pay $1,000, $2,000, $10,000 for these statements. I've got 29 conditions currently service connected, and if I applied for more, I'd probably have like 40, right? But the idea is I've got 29, but 22 of those were denied with negative medical opinions from VA medical examiners, right? So, or contractors, either they work for the VA, same thing, and I was able to overturn every single one of those with just information I found on the internet. Why? Because they were wrong, right? And it's not that hard to prove them wrong, right? So the idea here is save your money, right? If you follow what I'm saying to do, and build your claim with facts based on a statement, but you may not ever need to go and get an IMO or an independent medical examination or opinion, right? So again, watch this video and you know hopefully just your own effort just with a statement will take care of everything you need. Okay, one thing I see repeatedly on these is underratings, right? And usually those underratings are simply due because a veteran hasn't had the diagnostics ran, right? How many of you have had knee MRI? I both my knees are service connected, right? And I've never had an MRI. I'm rated at 10% on both knees, right? Should my knees swell often, right? Now, I haven't bothered to try to get my knee rating where it should be. Why? I'm already like at 10,000%, right? Getting my knee to the where it should be would just, waste the VA's time. And I don't want to clog the system with a needless request because I don't feel I need to justify my level of problems with my knee with the correct rating simply because I'm already rated, like I said, well over 100%, right? So the idea here is if though I wasn't rated at 100%, I absolutely would use my outside medical insurance, and I have TRICARE. I'm retired from service, so I have TRICARE, but I also have Medicare, right? So I can use both of those. And I already tell you, I found civilian doctors very open if you tell them, listen, my knee swells all the time. You've taken x-rays, and that hasn't explained my knee swelling. I would like to know what's wrong in there. Right. And, outside insurance, well, if you have outside insurance, get the correct diagnostic. I've listed, these are your typical things veterans file for. Tendonitis, bursitis, torn meniscus, ACL tear, arthritis, pain syndrome. But, there's only, you know, two things here that an x-ray is really good for is the pain syndrome, and that's to rule out other knee conditions, at least with the bone, and arthritis, right? As far as all these other things, you need a CT or an MRI or an ultrasound, right? So if you can get the diagnostics done to get the correct things identified in your knee, you can get a better rating, right? So you need to, again, the C&P exam, they're only going to do an x-ray. Now, under the duty to assist, I think you can force them to do an MRI, right? But again, do you want to go through that trouble? If you have outside insurance, just get it done outside. Yes, if I wanted to get one and I couldn't get it done outside, I would go through whatever steps necessary to make it my argument that, listen, you've got x-rays that don't show anything. My knee continually swells. There's something wrong. I need an MRI, right? So I think that argument would win the day, and I think the VA would be forced to do it. So either way, get the diagnostics ran so you know exactly what's wrong inside that damn knee. So because why? You can have 4 separate ratings on a knee, right? If you've got a bilateral knee problem, we're talking about the possibility of 8 separate ratings, right? Now, that's extremely unlikely, right? To have 4 ratings on one knee, but it's a possibility depending on, again, did you get the diagnostics ran to show everything wrong with your knee, right? So if you've had that done, maybe you qualify for those 4, right? But certainly, how many veterans do I see with 2 ratings on their knees? Lots of them. Mostly I see ratings with a single rating on a knee. That's what I see mostly, right? And I see most of those at 10%, right? And anytime I see a veteran with a single rating for his knee at 10%, I immediately think they're either underrated or as far as on their rating on what they are rated for, but maybe they should have another rating also, right? So to make sure those ratings are correct, right? And that you have the number of items rated that you should on your knee, you need to talk about exactly what your symptoms are. Another big problem I see with veterans out there is they don't talk about all their symptoms, right? They might mention a couple of things. Oh, my knee gives out once in a while, right? Or, but do they, if you have a bunch of symptoms, right now, if you ask me the symptoms with my knees, can I like tell you off the top of my head? I could get a couple of them, but I would probably forget. You know what? Look at a list of what are all the symptoms of knees. Here they are pretty much, right? If you have these, include them in your statement, right? So, if you have limitation of motion, instability, locking, pain, swelling, weakness, buckling, stiffness, looseness. Again, if you have these things, you need to say it. No one's going to assume you have these things going on with you. You need to say so, right? And that goes as well. Remember, a rating doesn't just get based on symptoms and range of motion, right? They're supposed to take into account functional limitations. Read the regulations that surround the rating schedule. It doesn't just say go to the rating schedule and look at the range of motion thing. It says also limitations, your impairments caused by these symptoms, these functional limitations, are supposed to be taken into account in your rating. Well, how are they doing that when they say your range of motion is just fine? Except, you know, your range of motion is fine, but because of your pain, you have to walk slowly. Right? How are they accounting that you can't walk briskly anymore? Right? How are they accounting for that your knees are so stiff after sitting that you can barely get up? Right? How are they accounting for that you can't stand for very long? Right? Or that with weight bearing, there's too much pain for you to go for long walks, right? Or that you stumble once in a while because your knee gives out. How are they accounting for that, right? I already tell you, if you push the issue, they have to account for those things, right? In your rating, they can't just look at the rating schedule and say at the range of motion thing and say, oh, well, his range of motion was good, so he has pain and motion, that's 10. They have to take into account that you have all these other things that are interfering with your function, right? These symptoms are interfering with your function, and that should be accounted for in your rating. Again, that's why you have to talk about these things, because push come to shove, you can get a better rating when you talk about these functional impairments. Before you do your statement, just don't jump right into it, right? Do a nice outline, right? You must construct a narrative that encompasses all relevant knee facts. Don't assume the medical professionals or that the adjudicators have any understanding of the physical demands or your experience while you're in military service, right? Even one service member to another service member may have completely different experiences as far as the physical stress that was on their knees, right? Depending on what their MOS was, depending on what their what service they're, what their PT program, whatever, right? So don't assume anything. Make an outline of everything you can think of that may have had anything to do with your knees, right? So, and here I'm putting some, some nonsense treatment stuff down. It's in-service, knee symptoms. I gained a lot of weight. I wore combat boots, and some of these things I'm mentioning because I did the research, and I found that there are things that we normally don't think about as a problem, like the wear of combat boots. Well, there are some studies to show combat boots have a relationship to knee problems, right? So, okay, now that I know that, I want to talk about that, right? What can I find about that? So I'm including that in my outline. The same with carrying a heavy load, like helmets, web gear, body armor. Like how might that affect my knees, right? So I'm putting down anything I can think of here on my outline, which is what you need. Make an outline, anything you can think of, right? And here's the good part about making your outline, right? Is I'm going to be providing you with this example statement, right, based on my experience in service, right, that you can use as a guide, right? So it'd help you make your outline. So, but another thing I want you to do is go look up, if you have a specific diagnosis for your knees that you're trying to relate from service, go look that up. Find out what the symptoms are, because off the top of my head, like if you ask me, what are my symptoms of my pain syndrome that I'm diagnosed with? Right, I'm diagnosed with all the things I'm listing here: the tendonitis, the pain syndrome, and arthritis, which is the next slide, right? And if you ask me to ask, what are all my symptoms per, I can't think of all of them, but with this reminder, for example, um, what is the pain like in my knee when I'm just sitting around? It's a dull, aching pain. It really is. I mean, it's exactly that, right? And the pain is worse when I walk up and down stairs, and when I kneel and squat, right? And with the tendonitis, yes, my knees do swell. Sometimes it looks awful. I'm like, whoa, I walked too long today, right? But the idea here is you may not be thinking of all these symptoms that are in direct relation to what you're diagnosed with, which is why you're probably diagnosed with it, right? So, but again, you want to include these things in your statement. Remember, arthritis, you never need a current diagnosis once you're diagnosed with it. But again, there are specific symptoms that are directly related to arthritis, right? So you want, again, to include the things that apply to you in your statement. I want to mention this determination by the VA, which, by the way, is etched in stone now. Well, at least now, I suppose they can have another memorandum, take it all back. But currently, this is the policy, right? Which is they made some ruling about how obesity is related to service connecting things. And in question 5 here is the one that I'm concerned with, which is obese if obesity is not a disease, could it be an intermediate step between service connecting disability and a current disability that may be service connected on a secondary basis? The answer to that on this memorandum was yes, it could. Obesity may be an intermediate step between service connected disability and a current disability that may be service connected on a secondary basis, right? So, keeping that in mind, we're going to allow being overweight or being obese into our statements because now it can be that intermediate step. So if you gained weight while you were in service, right, and or you gained weight after service due to your service connected conditions, that could be the reason leading to your secondary condition. For example, you have bad back, bad neck that you believe led to your weight gain. That could be a reason that causing your knee problems, that weight gain, right? So, um, or sleep apnea, for example, could be one of could lead to that. But the point here is now there's a determination that says it can be used as an intermediate step. So in my statement, since weight is a factor in my case, I'm going to be using that as one of the reasons that I have this knee problem, among others, right? But I want the examiner, because remember, we're targeting this statement specifically at, yes, the adjudicator, but for the most part, to the medical examiner. Remember, we don't want to go outside the VA and buy all these damn medical opinions, right? Again, I was able to overturn 22 negative medical opinions with just logic and information I found on the internet, right? So right up front, let's convince that VA medical examiner that our issues, right, are related to service by giving him the full information about our military experience. That's what we're doing here. All right, so let's actually talk about the statements. First paragraph, right, is every one of the paragraphs have a specific purpose, right? And there's many of us that don't have a lot of complaints about our problems while we were in service. By the way, these statements can be used for any condition. I'm going to be writing other statements, right, for other conditions, but this, at least till I get other statements written, this one can be used as a guide for anything, right? So, but anyway, this first paragraph, I'm talking about the fact that we are discouraged from going to sick call, right? I personally, discourage my soldiers from going to sick call. Not by saying don't go to sick call, but by calling them crybabies, right? Right. I mean, I was that sergeant who said, suck it up, right? And I mean, I was fairly, I guess, I don't want to say cruel. I don't know. Can you be cruel to your soldiers? I don't know. But I would say, stop the damn crying, suck it up, or get the hell out, right? So, because what? That's what I was taught, right? And I carried that on as a sergeant while I was in. I already tell you, I had a few people who I thought were acting, and thus I probably didn't view them in a favorable light because they were going to sick call all the damn time, right? So, and yeah, it pisses me off when everyone else is working and these gay people are on sick call, right? But anyway, the point here is lots of us suffer that type of. It's a theme, I think, in all the services. We're discouraged from going to sick call. So I wanted to talk about that. Why? Because you can't. It's not evidence until you talk about it. You can't assume that the person who's evaluating your claim, either the adjudicator or the medical examiner, knows that this goes on. Even if they were in the military, it doesn't hurt to remind them that this is the mentality of the service, is that you live with your pain, right? You don't go, crying about it, right? So, and I put here, that I, rarely went to sick call of my own volition. Typically, I was ordered to go, which is true. And my medical records have few complaints documented. I just wanted to make that clear right up front, and I think everyone should do that, right? Again, it's not evidence until you talk about it, right? So first paragraph, that's what that's about. Second paragraph, right? What we're trying to do in the second paragraph is, okay, you're saying you have these, you have knee problems, right? Well, if so, oh, by the way, that first paragraph, the very first sentence is really the most important thing, right? Which is, during my time in active duty, I had the following bilateral knee problem symptoms: pain, instability, swelling, weakness, stiffness, clicking, tenderness. So there's no doubt about what your symptoms were. You're saying right up front, right? Second paragraph, we're going to talk about what did we do about that, right? If you're not reporting it, because you're saying here that you didn't report it as often as maybe you should, right? So I think you need to explain that to the examiner. Why weren't you? I get it, it's discouraged. So then what did you do about it, right? And here I'm saying I chose to self-treat my knee problems with over-the-counter pain medications, ice or heat, compression bandages, and limb elevation. But I am mentioning I did go to sick call a couple of times specifically for my knees, right? And by the way, I was I was ordered to go. I was limping, right? My boss said, "No, no, no, you're going to sick call. Go." Right? So, but anyway, so I'm saying what they did. They gave me some ibuprofen on those occasions, right? But I also pointed out on my retirement exam, I checked the medical history form with painful joints, and I put down that I checked, bilateral knee pain is noted, right? So a couple of times I went to sick call, and I did report it when I retired from service, right? So that the examiner knows, okay, he did report some, right? Um, but I also want to also talk about, besides the documentation, what were like my daily symptoms? Like, what were some daily symptoms that I went through? So I'm talking about that a little bit after my first several years or so. And why I'm saying or so, again, don't ever corner yourself in with dates, right? Unless you know the dates, right? And again, after um, after my first several years or so, again, I don't was it 2 years or 3 years or 4 years? I don't know. Somewhere in that time frame, which is why I'm saying or so, right? So, but that way, no one could say, "Oh, well, you said 1976 this started." What? You know how many times I've seen claim denied because someone gets their facts wrong? right? It's different from what the record says. Oh, you said it started in 76, but your first treatment wasn't until 78. You liar, right? So, no, no, no. Don't hem yourself in. If you know dates, call them out. For instance, my treatment dates. Notice I'm calling them out by date. Why? There's your treatment record in my medical records from service, right? But as far as when did my symptoms actually start? Well, it was before that point, obviously. But when? I don't know, right? So I'm just mentioning that here, right? But I am saying most of my bilateral knee pain and other knee problem symptoms occurred daily. I want them to know it's not intermittent. Again, you know how many claims I've seen denied because they say you don't have a chronic condition while you're in service. And what do they use that determination based on how often you complained about it in your medical record? Well, that's not how chronictivity is established. We're talking about chronictivity of symptoms, right? Not diagnosis or treatment or complaints, right? So you need to tell them, right? Until you say it, it's not true, right? Till you say it, it's not evidence, which means say it. Don't let them shoot at you about, oh, well, it wasn't chronic. Okay, fine. Tell them, just like I am. I'm telling them it was a daily occurrence. My knees were always stiff in the morning, so I'm giving some specific. During the day, sitting with my knees bent for 30 minutes or so would cause stiffness, right? Also, as I straightened my knee, I could hear a clicking sound under my kneecap, right? Or around my kneecap. Um, Pain was worse when walking up or down stairs and when kneeling. So I'm giving them some specific things that I was feeling on a daily basis, right? Typical things, right? So this second paragraph, you're documenting what you did about it, if you did have any reports, and about what some of your daily symptoms were on a routine day. Now, paragraph 3, I wanted to specifically talk about the PT program. The Army's program is really strenuous, right? I can't say about, I don't know about the other services. I'm sure the Marines are very similar, if not worse, but I can't imagine it being worse. But the idea is if you had a strenuous PT program, you need to talk about that. Why? A lot of the exercises you do may, have an adverse effect on your knees depending on how many repetitions you do. And so you want to talk about that. So I'm specifically saying about my PT experience, right? That PT would exuberate my symptoms, right? And PT was a daily requirement, at least a 2-mile run, and many exercises that place stress on the knee. And I point out what those exercises are. I'm pointing out to the number of repetitions. 20 to 25 repetitions was the normal. However, often exercise repetitions were extensive, 40 to 50 range. Why? Remember, what we're going to do here is we want to give that examiner a picture of how the stress throughout the day would affect our knee, right? Most PT programs start in the morning. I have been in certain units where we shifted to afternoon PT, but for the most part, it's mostly in the morning, right? So it's your day starts out with PT typically, right? So you want, again, so we're going to show that build, how that stress is building on our knee with this statement, right? So it starts off with PT, and I'm talking about the extensive repetitions, and sometimes the run lengths were excessive. And then I talk about, on these occasions, my knees were sore, swollen, and felt very weak, right? I want them to know how my knees felt after this exercise program, especially on the days where things where the exercise was excessive in my view, right? The long runs and excessive number of knee repetitions caused my bilateral knee pain and other pain symptoms to worsen significantly my last few years, especially considering my weight gain during service. So I'm throwing in here, did I have any weight gain? In my case, I did. I gained 48 pounds while I was in. So, and I know what you're thinking, Mr. Fatty, right? No, no, no. That 174, pure muscle, baby. Anyway, so yeah, I joined when I was 17, right? A scrawny kid, right? 26, yeah, 126 pounds at 17, right? So I didn't really have that man's body yet, right? So, but thanks to the Army fitness program, I soon got that man's body, right? So, but during the whole service, I put on 48 pounds. And, if you're like a weightlifter, it's all muscle, right? But anyway, so the point is here, how much more stress I need to let that examiner know that this, I picked up what, a third of my, an extra, you know, well, not quite a third, I guess, but the point is, I put on, a crap load of weight, right? And how's that reflect on my knee when I'm doing all these excessive exercises, right? We need to let him know that, right? But all right, so the fourth paragraph, I'm talking about a normal duty day. What was my normal duty day like? And that's what you should talk about. How long were you on your feet? Much did you march? Right? Were you performing your duty on hard surfaces? Were you wearing combat boots all the time? Um, why? All these are factors that have to do with your knee, right? So again, I'm going to be justifying most of these things with publications at the end of this statement, right? So there's a method to this madness, talking about your experience, but then justifying or showing how your experience in the military has led to these problems, and there's publications that reinforce that your experience, leads to knee problems, right? So anyway, uh, so I'm talking about sometimes PT and marching was always on the street, right? PT was conducted in combat. At times, PT we did in boots, right? We didn't go into our PT uniform, especially my early years in the service. There was no PT uniform, right? So, often our run was while we were in uniform, with shirts off, right? But everything else on, right, including in combat boots, right? So, but I want to talk about my typical work area floor was concrete or hard type surfaces. All marching and duty were in combat boots. Occasionally and now at the end of this, I want to talk about occasionally during the workday, my knees would buckle, causing me to temporarily lose balance. I would have a slight limp for the rest of that day. And you see what I'm doing here is building up. Had PT, did all this exercise, had a whole day of standing on my feet and doing all kinds of different things. By the end of the day, my knees just can't take it, right? Which is all true. Of course, this was later on in my service, right? But the idea is that these are all factual statements here, right? That I think an examiner needs to know. Another factor, paragraph 5, and this might not be for everyone. And again, if this isn't a factor in your case, just take it out, right? But those of you who deployed, and those of you who spent a lot of time training to deploy, right? Training is often much more strenuous on the body than the actual deployment is, as far as on the body stress. Now, mental stress, of course, your deployments are usually far more stressful. But the whole point here is we want to talk about that deployment in relation to how it might affect our knees, right? And so I talk about how often I was on these type of training or deployments, and then I talk about what my experience was. During these deployments, I was required to wear full combat gear, including M16, helmet, flak vest, web gear, ammunition, full water canteen, combat boots, right? Because I'm trying to demonstrate here, I'm carrying a lot of weight, right? And I'm talking about how long an average of 10 to 12 hours a day I had that gear on, sometimes up to 18 hours. There were days where I worked 2 days straight, maybe three, going on 3 days sometimes, without sleep, right? So this wearing this gear almost constantly, right? So, and sometimes had to wear a pack 20, 30 pounds, right? So if you're one of those soldiers, you need to talk about this stuff. Why? There's studies to show this heavy loading affects your body, right? Including your knees, right? So if this is your situation, you need to include it in your statement. This heavy load of equipment kept all my knee pain and other knee symptoms in a nearly constant state of flare. Yes, my knees were constantly in pain, right? So especially during these times, but I sucked it up like everyone, right? Pretty much everyone sucks it up, right? That's what soldiers are about. Do our job, pain or not. Anyway, so um, now that concludes the history portion of our statement, right? But now we want to talk about what's current now. And as far as symptoms, functional limitation, diagnoses, whatever, right? So paragraph 6, we're just going to start off with one of the most important things you can do with your entire statement, which is to include a statement of continued symptomology. Again, I've seen 1,000 claims denied. I've seen, I mean, it's crazy how many I've seen denied because they say, oh, there's no continued symptomology, right? You got out of service, your pain magically disappeared, right? Again, why do they say that? Because you haven't said otherwise, right? Again, it's not evidence until you say it, right? So say it. So start it off. I'm starting off my current problems with my bilateral knee problem symptoms that began in service, including pain, instability, swelling, weakness, stiffness, clicking, tenderness, continued continuously after service to present. Done. No one can say that the stuff was intermittent or wasn't chronic after service, right? Just give that statement. I don't care what your claims for. Always include that statement, right? Why? Because then they jump to conclusions. Well, I don't want to say jump to conclusions because an adjudicator can only use the evidence at hand. They're not allowed to assume things, right? So don't don't let them offer a conclusion because you haven't said different, right? Get this statement in there. Anyway, and then go directly from listing your symptoms to, all right, what functional limitations are they causing in your everyday life, right? Again, now we're going to talk about like just a normal day, right? And so I'm talking about, I've stopped running, because and doing knee specific exercises, the stupid ones we done while we were in the service, right? I don't do any of those anymore. Why? They make my knee hurt more, right? And so forget it. I don't do them anymore. So I even brisk walks bring on symptoms, right? So although I still try to do it, but again, I'm putting here my walking's limited really to a fairly slow pace. Certainly, I wouldn't call it aerobic exercise, and I can only tolerate, basically short walks, right? So I'm putting all that down. So I try to supplement my rock with bike riding, but I'm putting here, but I only can tolerate that. I've got sciatica, right? I can't sit in that damn seat, every single day. I can do it occasionally, and I do, right? So standing in place, I'm giving some examples. Standing in place for more than 2 or 3 minutes is intolerable, such as standing in a checkout line after shopping, right? I love the self checkouts now. Oh, so nice not standing in line. Anyway, for a number of reasons, right? But sitting with my knees bent for more than 10 minutes causes my knees to be stiff. It's difficult to walk for a few minutes after that. My knees are very stiff in the morning, and it takes around 30 minutes for the stiffness to. So I'm giving some examples of what just a normal day's like, right? Without going into it, what my symptoms are, I'm starting out with, but then, what some of these problems are with my knee. And I'm bringing on, because I'm talking about exercise here, because again, I'm going to justify why I can't exercise like I want to exercise as when we get to the publications, right? So I want to talk about that now because it is a significant problem that I can't lift the weight as often as I wanted to. I can't do anything as often as I wanted to anymore due to my physical limitations, right? So I want to make sure I cover all of that, right? Because I believe it is a factor leading to other things, right? So um, after service, I continue to self-treat, making it clear I'm not going to the doctor all the time, right? But you want to make, what are you doing about your current symptoms? Well, I'm still self-treating, right? And I'm actually putting here, I've never sought outside treatment for my knee problems. I haven't. I know what to do about knee problems. Well, I don't need to ask a doctor. Might there be something they can operate on and like fix? Yeah, I get it. Lots of people are okay with knives getting stuck into you, right? But I'm not letting a doctor or anyone else. I'm not voluntarily letting them like stick a scalpel into me and start cutting away parts. No, I'll live with what I got, right? Because at least I can live with what I got. If they make it worse, yeah, you know what? I'm not doing that myself. But anyway, I'm making it clear that I'm still self-treating. I've never sought treatment for my knee. But I do say here, currently my knees are, that I do go for my annual physicals, and I have reported my knee problems through my physicals, and they have diagnosed me and my with three particular conditions, which I put down here, which I'm service connected for all of those things, and I filed a claim for all of those, right? So um, I am also diagnosed with several other lower extremity conditions that I believe cause or aggravate my current knee problems, right? And I'm mentioning what those are. Now, you notice I put the dates by when I was diagnosed with these different conditions. Actually, those dates aren't exactly accurate. I just put some dates down. But I was diagnosed with all those in the past several times. So, um, but I wanted to put a date down to show they can go look, right, at the actual, when it was there. It was all done at the VA. So, that's why I mentioned here through my physicals. If these were done outside of the VA, right, I would actually put the date and where that document was from, right? If it was from, my local clinic, I would say, local clinic, this date, right? So that they'll know to go to that exact document. I want to make it easy for the examiner to look through the record and find what he needs to find, right? So again, try to be as specific as you can if you're talking about these diagnoses and when they happen. I'm not putting any dates on my service-connected conditions simply because they're all service-connected. Just look at the record, right? And I'm also putting my weight down as of my last physical, which is, by the way, only 4 pounds over my retirement weight, right? 26 years later, and I've only put on 4 pounds. Not bad. Even though, have I been heavier than that? Yeah, a couple of times, way heavier. But now I think I've got it under control. And by the way, I'm going to be talking about that here in a statement because we should try to control our weight. And if we are, we should talk about that, right? So this may, as far as the rating goes, when you're going to talk about flare-ups, this may be the most important thing you can talk about to getting the correct rating, right? Because they're not supposed to just rate you on that day you go for your exam if you're not having a flare up that day. If you're not having a flare up that day, you're not there at the examiner on a bad day. So you need to let them know exactly what your bad days are like and how often they happen. Because your rating should be taken from your bad day, and they're supposed to try to envision, right, what that looks like. And they're supposed to estimate what a further range of motion limitation would be during that flare up, as well as take into account further functional limitations during a flare up. Right? All that's supposed to be accounted for, and that's really where you should get your rating from. Right? So you need to be very specific on this portion, right? And so that later, if someone says something different than what's that's in your statement, you could say, "Oh, no, no, no. My statement says exactly what you're supposed to be doing or what my particular issues are. You don't get to say that that's not my issue because I've reported it on my statement, right? So don't act like you don't know it, right? Which, by the way, they do all the time. They routinely ignore veterans' flare-ups in when it comes to the rating. Don't let them do that. I haven't let them do that. My ankles, for example, where they gave 10% normally, but during flare-ups, I said, "Oh, no, 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 no. I've told you about these extra problems during my flare-ups. So you don't get away with, not accounting for that." And yeah, my ratings went from 10 to 20% for both ankles based on flare-ups, right? Why? Because I stuck to my guns and had a statement that backed up what I was saying. So they couldn't say otherwise, right? So you need to do the same thing. Make sure you detail your flare-ups clearly, right? Like here, currently 1 to 2 days a week. Every week, I experience bilateral knee plane flare-ups to varying degrees. Then I'm going to talk about that. Typically, my range of motion is reduced by half, right? And in my case, that's true. In your case, it may be reduced by a third or by a tenth. Say it, but put a number on it, right? Why? They're supposed to do an estimate on further limitations during your flare-up. So if your range of motion was measured at 130 degrees, and you say you reduced by half, then their estimate should be 65, right? Here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing on compensation and pensions when a veteran says, because a veteran's not explaining it very well, he said, oh, I can hardly walk during a flare-up. Well, how do they estimate that, right? You need to give them an example to make it easy to estimate. Now, so what I see is I'll see, okay, a veteran has 130, degree range of motion. And then on the flare-up, the examiner will put, oh, during a flare-up, it's only 120. What the hell? How did he get that? Unless the veteran said it's about a tenth, right? Well, I suppose that could be. But the point here is, if you have a significant reduction in range of motion during your flare-ups, you need to say that. Say it's reduced by half. And I go on to say, and often reduced completely, right? In other words, often I cannot bend my knee at all, right? What's the estimate for not being able to bend my knee at all? It's 0. Right? How would anyone argue anything other than that? Well, what's my range of motion if I can't move my knee? 50? All right, yeah, an examiner might say that because he's an idiot, right? But the idea is, if there are times where you can't bend your knee or you're significantly limited, you need to try to put a number on that as much as you can, right? My range of motion is limited by half or a third or a tenth, whatever, right? But again, put down what is true for you. And so I also go on to say the flare-ups are brought on by activity. The more I'm active, the more I'll have these flare-ups. And I'm putting on how long these, we see during flare-ups, I cannot kneel at all, right? So I'm giving them examples of functional limitations. I can't kneel, period, right? Standing in place, not possible, right? And walking is limited to movements around my home, approximately 20 feet, such as going to the bathroom and answering the doorbell. On extreme flare-ups that happen, typically bi-weekly, I'm prone, I'm reclined with my knee straight with no possibility of weight bearing and or any activity that requires my knee to bend. And at those times, I'm on crutches to move around. So when you need to describe your flare-ups, not just in the type of range of motion limitation you might have, but talk about any and all functional limitations that you have. Again, don't exaggerate, right? Keep it true, but at the same time, don't macho things. You're not in the service anymore. You don't have to suck it up, right? Let them know if you have problems, talk about it, right? Because that's the only way you're going to get a rating that you should have. All right, so talking about our current issues and our flare-ups, now we're going to go on and complement everything we've said in our whole statement with publications. Again, do you have to do this? No, you don't, right? You don't have to include anything else. Everything you've said, the examiner should have enough knowledge about knees because, in theory, these people we're going to see in comp and pens are professionals, right? I mean, they're medical professionals. I shouldn't have to tell them a lot of these things, right? But here's what I'm finding. Then you have to tell them, right? Right? It's like the examiners we see are like clueless. I mean, I don't even, I can't even explain most of the nonsense opinions I see coming out of the Veterans Administration. Absolutely moronic, right? I mean, it's like, what the hell? Where did this person get their training at? Don't they read? Anyway, the point here is I feel it's necessary for if a veteran really wants to win his claim to do some of the homework on your own. Now, what I don't want to see a veteran do is just list a bunch of things that you think are related, right? You need to, everything that you're going to point out, you need to relate that to you. You need to look at the publication that you're quoting or that you're referring to. You need to find some of the key elements that relate specifically to you and then relate them to you, right? So I start off this part with, published considerations. I believe the following manual studies, journals, and other treatises are related or are relevant to my knee claims. Hence, I ask they be given due consideration, right? Now, another thing, as from often what I see in compensation and pension exam opinions that are negative is they completely ignore a veteran statement or any publications that he's added. And I think part of the reasons, at least they ignore the publications, is that you haven't tailored those to you personally, right? So they look at it as general information and then discount it, right? So you need to make sure each one of these publications, you absolutely tie it to you, right? So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the physical fitness manual, right? Because I made a big deal out of the fitness program, right? So I want to now talk about the Army policy, right? Directly from the manual, right? So here I'm again, if the examiner wants to know those exercises I mentioned, go to chapter 7, right? But one of the key parts about the philosophy and in the military training is um, it states the workload of each exercise session must exceed the normal demands placed on the body in order to bring about a training effect. That's true, right? I mean, you're not going to get conditioned well by minimizing exercises, right? You need to stress your muscles, right? And that stress within reason, right, will lead to a training effect. In other words, muscle strengthening, right? So, but the problem with that policy is the military, at least while I was in, at least the Army, we don't have professionally trained PT instructors, right? I mean, I could tell you about the day where I was, my first day of PT. I mean, I was standing in formation, getting ready to do PT like we did every day. And to my surprise, the first sergeant said, "Sergeant Newcomb, front and center." I said, "Oh shit," right? I'm like, the first time you're out there is kind of like, yeah, right? So even though, yeah, you've been doing PT for probably, a long time at that point, so you know what to do, but leading it's different from being in it, right? So, so that, so there I was leading PT, had no idea what I was doing other than what I had always done, right? So, and in a few of my units, I became the primary PT instructor, right? So, and I'm putting down here, all right, we have this policy, but you know what? They don't give any training in physical fitness science. They don't. The program's not monitored by any medical personnel. I mean, we're winging it, right? There's a fine line between bringing about a training effect and causing an overuse injury, right? So if you don't know where that line is, and I certainly had no idea where that line is, right? And remember, that's an individual line, right? We're not doing PT, we're doing organized PT as a unit. It's not tailored to the individual, right? So what's overused for one person may not be overused for another, right? So without any type of training at all, and I put it in here that my personal experience with that policy, right? I led PT hundreds of times, probably more than 1,000 times. Like I said, there was a few of the units I was in. I was the primary PT instructor. I was out there every day giving PT, right? And believe me, when I gave PT, especially in my younger years, when we were done, people knew they were stressed, right? I did my best to bring about that training effect, right? But the idea is that I did it all without any type of training. I did it by what I thought should be done. And was that right? Maybe, maybe not. Right? The point is, the medical examiner who's reading this needs to know I was out there doing this and having it done to me with there was no rhyme or reason from a logic perspective on how to properly design a PT program. We were winging it, right? So I want them to know that. And that other people thought different. I really did try to keep repetitions to what I considered reasonable. But there were other people who, let me tell you, they absolutely believed you had to every single day bring about muscle failure, right? To whatever exercise we were doing, you needed to run that formation or do the exercises, and people cried for you to stop, right? You kept on doing it until literally no one could do it anymore, right? And usually, of course, the PT leading people leading PT formations are, some of your fittest people, right? So, normally they can withstand, they can like dish it out, right? So I know I certainly could. So, but anyway, I want the examiner to know this, right? That we are winging these things, right? And then I go on to say, it's my experience now, especially in hindsight, that these excessive exercises and long runs, um, you know, in my particular case, because I'm saying it here, in my case, led to daily knee pain, swelling, and other symptoms. Like I've already mentioned that up top, that after PT, that would happen. I'm reinforcing it down here in reference to my experience with the Army policy, right? And then I want him to also know that these runs are conducted after we do the calisthenics. So we may do, you know, multiple exercises at 40 to 50 repetitions, and now we're going to go for a 5 or 6 mile run, right? What the hell's that doing on your knee, right? Again, we want the examiner to know all of this. We're trying to, through this whole exercise, we're letting the examiner know about this extreme stress on our knees, right? So that he'll have reasons to say, I see. Yes, absolutely. The fact that his knee was swelling after these excessive periods shows that he was having tendon problems or ligament problems. There was swelling evident. I mean, this was happening repeatedly. Obviously, there was a permanent injury that was going to result eventually, right? Which is what happened, right? So we want to just make it clear how it happened, right, to that examiner, right? The manual also states, since injuries can be caused by running on hard surfaces, soldiers should, if possible, avoid running on concrete. Soldiers should train in running shoes. And with adequate footwear, running on roads shouldn't be a problem, right? Well, I'm ending this with daily runs were always conducted on the roadways and occasionally while in combat boots. So I'm letting him know sometimes we didn't follow what the manual said to do, right? Why? Because we were winging it, right? A commander isn't going to, often, get the shirts off, right? And, oh shit, what's going on, right? Next thing you know, you're on a 5 mile run in boots, right? So, but anyway, the idea here is let this examiner know this, but remember, that's why up top I was talking about our duty day was always on hard surfaces, that we're always wearing combat boots. Why? Because I'm leading to back all that experience up with what the manual calls for, right? So again, see how I've related the manual to my personal experience while I was in the service, right? And how it impacted me, right? So that's how you want to present your publications, no matter which article you're talking about. So Now, by the way, these particular articles, I've downloaded each of them. I have them in a folder on my desk. I'll be more than happy to send them to anyone who wants to use those specific ones. I'd prefer to post them on my website, but I guess I can't do that without permission of the publishers. I probably can't even email those to people with. The thing is, the names are here. You know, Google the name and you'll find that article. I find all these on the internet, right? So you Google these names, you'll find the article, and then just run it off for yourself, right? So, but each of these articles is linked to my personal experience, and I'm doing that by again in each stage. Do not forget, call out a key finding from the article, note it by page. And by the way, notice I even did that with the fitness manual. The training effect, page 1.4 or 1-4. The manual also states page 3.2, 13.2, right? So every place, make it easy for the examiner to go in and find the quote you're talking about. But find that quote and then relate it to you. This particular article, number 2 here, says collective evidence suggests that training and equipment contribute to a large portion to injury sustained, in particular large loads borne by soldiers, high intensity training programs, and the influence of footwear have been identified as significant causative factors in lower limb injury in military populations. So what's important about that, and that's one of the reasons during my statement, I was talking about that large load that we carried, right? Is when I was in deployment or training in tactical environments. I talked about the PT program, the high intensity training program. I talked about the combat wear. Why? I'm going to be in reinforcing that with this study that specifically said these are all factors in knee problems, right? So and then I'm ending it with, during my service, I did have large loads and PT was high intensity and I did wear combat boots all the time. So, which I've already talked about in my statement, but I'm mentioning it again here, tying it to me, right? So, the second article is about arthritis. Most knee claims I see involve arthritis. Now, you may have other conditions also, but arthritis is usually among them, right? So if you have arthritis as one of your issues, you definitely want to talk about that. But there's this study here that says rates of osteoarthritis are significantly higher in military populations than in comparable age groups in the general population. Studies also suggest that physical activity involving repetitive joint loading may be associated with the occurrence of arthritis. Now, why is that important? What have we been talking about in all of our statements? The repetitive nature of what we do, right? Repetitive nature of the PT program and all the exercises and the running, the repetitive nature of our duty day and the hard surfaces, how long we were on our feet, the repetitive nature of our deployments and what our combat load was like and how much weight was on our knee, right? So we're talking this study, this study specifically says, okay, yes, all of that's involved. This repetitive joint issue is leading to this arthritis. And yes, this study was specifically on people while they were in service, but how many of us had actual x-rays looking for arthritis? This study specifically went to look for that, right? But otherwise, like I said, I hardly ever complained about problems. And they certainly didn't take any x-rays of my knees. I mean, I complained about my knees at twice while I was in service. And then at my retirement exam, they didn't do x-rays at any of those times. Was there arthritis there? Who knows? But this study absolutely points to the possibility that there likely was arthritis there at that time, right? So either way, I'm relating it to me again. PT, work duties, tactical environment duties, all put extreme repetitive stress on my knee joints, right? So, and then we get down here to 4, those of you who have feet and ankle problems that are service connected, right? Again, I found an actual study out there that says showed that people with foot and ankle symptoms were at a higher risk of developing OA symptoms, arthritis, and symptomatic radiographic knee OA compared to those without foot and ankle symptoms. And I simply point out, I'm service connected for both foot and ankle symptoms. So if you have those type of issues, yes, you need to, again, bring out the study, point to the fact that, yeah, you know what, to a medical professional, this should be just common knowledge, right? Of course, your foot and ankle problems may lead to knee problems. It's like, duh, right? Just to me, common sense says that. But again, a study that says it is better than hoping the examiner will consider it, right? Um, Now, when I get down to the tendonitis part here, I'm switching to weight um, instead of just overuse, even though I could have talked about that too, right? But I wanted to switch to weight because the weight's a factor in my case. So I wanted to start talking about that because according to the CDC, it's like 70% of the American population is like overweight or obese, right? So I think that percentage is, you know, probably typical of the veteran population also, right? So it may be a factor that a veteran needs or can, especially if your weight issue is was brought on by uh, your a service connected disability or your weight was gained while you were in service, then you can use that as that intermediate step to secondary service connection. So here I'm just going to talk about that for those of you where weight is a consideration in your claim, right? So I'm talking about the article specifically says that if you're overweight, you're more likely to develop this, right? And I'm pointing to what my weight was at service separation, what it currently is. Both of those are considered overweight. So I want them to know, all right, well, yeah, I've had this overweight, and maybe that's part of the reason I have this problem, right? So, but now I want to start talking about that weight as, okay, I have this weight. Why do I have this weight? Because typically, if you say, I have a bad back problem, and because of that, I do less exercise, which means I end up, gaining weight. Well, again, if I read 1,000, comp and pen opinions where the doctor says, oh, you know what, there's no evidence to say that a back problem will lead to weight gain. So no, this guy just eats less calories. He's just a fatty because he's eating too much, right? I mean, that's what they say, right? So we have to fight that up front, knowing they're going to say that, right? And do they always say that? I've never seen where they haven't said it, where it was an issue. I've never seen them say one time that there was a justification for a service-connected disability leading to weight gain, right? Not a VA examiner, right? Or a contractor. None of them, not once, right? And I've seen thousands of these damn things, right? So the idea is, you know what? Right up front, we're going to nip that in the butt, right? So I'm going on to the pain syndrome here. Again, every one of the things I'm claiming, I want to offer something, right? So I'm diagnosed with, right? So that I'm claiming and I'm diagnosed with, right? So the article notes overuse and playing on hard surfaces, and recommends a healthy weight as a preventive measure, right? So then I'm relating that article to me, right? Is that, my knees were under constant overuse through excessive and normal knee exercise repetitions during PT, normal duties, and heavy load during tactical environments, all performed while on hard surfaces. So I'm letting them know, hey, I've had all these problems while I was in service, right? So no wonder I have this condition. But I also want to talk about my weight. My weight's 174 at separation, which is considered overweight, right, by medical standards. However, I was within acceptable RME, and I never even had to undergo the pinch test. Okay, so I mean, you could just see I was pure muscle. But anyway, so all right, I like to say that. All right. So anyway, now to fight that part about I go to the CDC where it talks about how do you maintain a healthy weight. Well, this is the CDC, right? So, the VA is not going to get to say, "Oh, the CDC don't know what they're talking about." No, they don't. They're not going to do that, nor would they even attempt to. So, the CDC is a great place to get information. So, um, the article states to maintain your weight, work your way. Well, what it says is moderate intensity aerobic activity or vigorous intensity aerobic activity, right? So, now remember, in my statement, I made clear that I can't do that anymore. I specifically noted my exercises, even walking, is at a fairly slow pace, certainly not at a level that would be considered moderate aerobic activity, right? So, and by the way, they got studies to show that anything less than moderate doesn't lead to any weight control, right? Oh, it'll help you maintain some tone. I mean, it's still good for your health, but it won't maintain your weight, right? So, and again, strong scientific evidence shows that physical activity can help maintain your weight over time. Of course it can. No one's going to disagree with that. I completely agree with that, right? Sad thing is, I can't do moderate activity anymore. And I've already made that clear, right? And I'm reinforcing that. In my case, vigorous intensity aerobic activities are completely out of the question. Yeah, you forget that, right? Even routine moderate intensity aerobic activity like brisk walking and bike riding would cause my feet, ankle, calf, and knee conditions to flare, resulting in unnecessary pain and functional limitations. But I'm going on to say, that doesn't mean I'm sitting on the couch. I always exercise within my known limitations, right? Now, remember, we've already talked about that in our statement. I talk about how much I can walk and that I try to walk 3 to 5 times a week, right? So I've already covered that I am doing things, what I can do within my limitations, right? So anyway, due to my limited exercise capacity, um, I do my best to control my weight. So I'm going to go on and talk about that now, right? That I try to limit my calorie intake because this is important information to the medical examiner. I've got some weight on me, but I can't exercise like they say I should to lose weight. So I try to control my diet, right? And then I talk about I try to limit it to 1,800 calories a day, and I try to reduce it to 1,500, which I have. But I already tell you, there's a point where if I lower my eating habits too low, um, you know what? I get to a point where I just don't. I I get so depressed that I can't eat, especially what I want to eat. That you know what? There's a fine line between controlling your weight through diet and 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 causing self-depression from depriving yourself of food, right? So anyway, so I at the very end here I say limiting my calorie intake to 800 today is a balance between my physical and mental health that for the most part works for me. So I'm letting that examiner know, you know what, I'm doing what I can do to control my weight so that he knows there's a reason for I can't exercise like I want to related to my service, and I am trying to control my diet, right? Um, for those of you who have major depressive disorder or another mental health condition, and I haven't checked on all of them, but most people that I found have PT also have MDD, right? Major depressive disorder. And one of the diagnostic criteria for MDD, which I have quoted here, is significant weight loss, not when not dialing, or weight gain, or a decrease or increase in appetite, is one of the diagnostic criteria. And but believe me, it's absolutely one of my diagnostic criteria because weight gain due to increased appetite is exactly what happens the more I'm depressed, the more I feel it's a constant battle for me to control my cravings for food, right? So and other than when I'm extremely depressed. But I'll admit I suffer from depression, right? So it's a daily struggle, but when it's my normal level of depression, really, I can offset it somewhat by eating food I like, right? And the fact that I can't do that actually, causes me more depression. But I want to talk about that here because often, again, the VA medical examiners always come up with, oh, well, your mental health, that's not gonna be, no nonsense. Part of the diagnostic criteria for MDD is the fact that you may gain weight due to increased appetite. It's one of your symptoms. So don't say it's not related to my service condition. It's specifically related through the diagnostic criteria. If that's your case, it's absolutely my case. I have went through times where I've lost weight too, but those are times where I've been extremely depressed. And when I get extremely depressed, I stop eating completely, right? And but the idea is that depending on my level of depression depends on what happens with my appetite, right? So it is a factor. So those of you out there who have major depressive disorder, or again, look up your specific thing you're diagnosed with and see is an increased appetite or weight gain one of the issues that's related to it. So, but I'm going on to say here at the bottom, that not being able to eat things I like, it's always on my mind, and that as I noted above, I found that there's a balance. I found a balance between my physical health and mental health in relation to weight. But I do want to make it clear that maintaining that balance is a constant struggle, and I do have weight fluctuations, and these fluctuations are directly related to how I feel, right? As far as my depression, right? So again, so that's the end of this video. And what I've tried to do was link everything together, right? For all the things that might be, service related that affect our needs, including our weight, right? And why we would have that weight, or why our physical condition in the military might lead to that, right? So anyway, these full statements are on my website on vamadness.com. You can download them, modify them to fit your specific situation. And again, you have any questions, just contact me through vamadness.com, and I'll be happy to advise on whatever questions you have. So I'm going to let you go. Irate Veteran out.